In this lesson, we will create motion paths for shapes to follow for both 2D and 3D layers. Okay, so I want to create a motion path so that we can add some sort of a arrow tip or a circle to the end of this graph that we've created. And I want it to follow along as that graph is being revealed. So first, I want to show you how to do this for just plain 2D layers because it's just a little bit easier to understand and get the hang of that way. And then we'll come back into our main project and do it for a 3D layer since all of these layers are 3D. So let's just go create a new composition to practice in. So come over here to the project panel and go ahead and click Create a New Composition. And you want to make sure that that's 1280 by 720 just so we can kind of see how large of an area we're working with. Okay, so I want to show you also a new way to make a circle than how we've made it in the past. Before we've just used the shape tool, but we can also do it by masking a solid. So come up here, go to Layer, New, Solid, and this yellow color is fine to use. And then we'll come up here and instead of that rectangle tool, just drop that down and grab the ellipse tool. So now this is going to be really similar to when we drew a mask earlier. I'm just going to start right in the middle of my solid, drag out from that center. I'm going to hold shift to make it a perfect circle and control so that it's scaling from the center. So just right about there, just kind of a smallish circle. So now I want to create a motion path and we're going to do that with the pen tool. So with my medium yellow solid selected that's creating my circle, I'm just going to go up there, grab my pen tool and then just draw a path here on the composition. And it doesn't have to be in any particular order. This is just for practice. Okay, so now we have our path drawn, and it's important to notice whenever you're drawing the path, whatever point you draw first or whatever vertex you make first, that is going to be the place that the motion path begins. So whenever we apply this motion path to our circle, it's going to follow this line from this left vertex and then loop around all the way to the right vertex. So just keep that in mind. Now the way that we apply this path to our medium yellow solid is that we come down here to mask 2, which is how the path has been created. And we'll drop this down. You want to grab the mask path for that second mask. Mask 1 is what's creating our circle. Mask 2 is creating the path. So go ahead and grab the mask path of mask 2. And we're going to cut that from this medium yellow solid. So just hit Control X to cut that. And now we're going to bring up the position property for our medium yellow solid. So with that layer selected, hit the P key and then select the position property and hit Control V to paste that into the position property. So now I'm going to just drag along here to scrub this, and you can see that it's following that path in the order that we created those points. Okay, so now we're ready to create a motion path for our main composition. So let's jump back over there. Just click that main composition tab, and let's do the same thing that we did earlier. Just go to Layer, New, Solid to create that solid, and I'm just using the same color that I've used for the graph line, so you can just color pick that and then go ahead and grab that ellipse tool again and we'll draw an ellipse just like we did earlier, holding shift and control. And I'm going to make this ellipse a little bit smaller than the smallest circle that we already have there in our composition. Okay, so now I've just deselected that, and before I go ahead and start drawing the motion path, I want to just go ahead and turn this into a 3D layer. So you can go ahead and turn on the 3D switch for the medium yellow solid, and you'll see that that moves that just a little bit. And I also want to move this into position so that it's at the same place in Z space that my graph is. So go ahead and grab your medium yellow solid and we'll bring this down right above that shape layer 3, which is what is creating the graph line. Okay, so I'm going to drag this back down just so we can see what we're doing. And I want to look at the position of this layer. So go ahead and hit the P key with the medium yellow solid layer selected. And then we'll do the same thing for our shape layer. So you can see that this is at 278 in z-space while our medium yellow solid is defaulting to 0. So let's go ahead and plug in 278 for the z value of our medium yellow solid. And if you want to, we can rename this medium yellow solid. Let's go ahead and select that, right click, go to rename, and we'll just type in circle pointer. So that might help you identify what layer that is a little bit better. And you can tell that whenever we plugged in that 278 bit of data, we are now using those blending modes from our other shapes because they are set to multiply. So now I'm ready to go ahead and draw my motion path. So it doesn't really matter exactly where my circle is on the composition. In fact, I want it really to just be out of the way of the graph so I can clearly see what I'm drawing. And I'm going to drag my current time indicator forward so that the graph has been fully revealed and I can see all of the lines that it's creating. So I'm going to be drawing on top of the graph layer, but I'm going to be actually applying the drawing that we're creating to the circle pointer layer. So go ahead and select your graph layer and lock that layer. So this little switch right next to that layer is going to lock it, and it's going to keep me from drawing anything extra on that layer accidentally. So with that layer locked, go ahead now and select your circle pointer layer, and then we'll grab the pen tool just like we did earlier and begin drawing a path just along this graph line. So I'm going to start down here in the lower left-hand corner and just click up and down. And I'm not dragging as I'm clicking at all because I want these lines to be perfectly straight. So just probably finish it off about there. I'm just kind of guessing where that would probably end, just right about there. And it's important, if you need to zoom in, to go ahead and do that and make sure that the points of your lines that you're creating are right in the middle of this area here where it kind of creates an elbow in your graph. So I'm just readjusting those slightly. And now this looks ready to go. So let's go ahead and paste this mask path into the position data for our circle pointer. So go ahead and drop down your masks. And this is again going to be mask 2. So we'll just drop that down, find the mask path property, hit Control X to cut that. And then we'll select our circle pointer and hit the P key to bring up our position data. And then select that and hit Control V to paste it. Okay, so when we pasted that, you'll notice that a few things changed. It looks like we still are creating the right shape for our path, but it doesn't look like it's in the right position. And sure enough, if we come down here and look at the position data for our circle pointer, the Z value is at 0. And that's simply because whenever we draw that path, it is at a 2D position simply because it's just a flat mask. So we're not getting any kind of 3D position data whenever we're drawing that. So we need to add that 3D position data to these keyframes. And there's an easy way for us to do that. So I'm going to zoom in on these keys a little bit and let's just talk about why these keyframes even look different from normal keyframes that we've set so far. The keyframes that we have here in the middle that are grayed out are called roving keyframes. And basically, whenever After Effects automatically sets keyframes in this way, roving keyframes are taking the distance between the points and distributing the speed of our circle so that it never changes speed, even if the points are farther apart from each other. So normally, if we had drawn this motion path with just position data, it would take our circle longer to get from this point to this point, simply because there's more space in between those 2 points. So it automatically is setting those roving keys for us to regulate that space and that speed and standardize it. So what I'm going to do is take these out of their roving keyframe mode. And all you have to do is select one of those keys and move it a little bit forward in time. And you see that those snap back to linear keyframes. And it's okay that we're snapping these back to linear keyframes because I'm going to use them as the position data for whenever I want this circle to match up with the speed of the graph revealing. So I'll show you how to do that in a moment. But first we need to read reposition the data so that it has the Z value that our other graph layer has, which is 278. So an easy way to do this is simply to put your current time indicator on any one of these points, because we all want these points to have the same Z position data. Now, with your current time indicator on that point, go ahead and select all of the keys at the same time. And now we're just going to come over here to our position data and drag that Z value up to 278. Now, it's important that you drag the value with all of the keys selected and that you don't have all the keys selected and try to type it in, because then it's only going to type it in for one point, which you could go ahead and do. You could select each point and type in 278 for the Z data. But now we've dragged it to 278, and if you'll notice, all of those keyframes now have 278 as their Z position. And there's one last thing that we need to do to fix this, because now we have this at the right position in Z space, but the X space and maybe just a little bit of the Y space is off. So let's go ahead and do the same method that we just did. Put your current time indicator on any one of these keyframes, select them all, and then I'm just going to come over here to my X value and drag this so that it realigns with the graph. And again, this is just happening because that mask data that we created was not able to reference the 3D data that we needed it to have whenever we first just drew it out flat on top of everything. So now this appears to be following along our graph as we scrub this, and that's exactly what we want. But now we need to go back in and retime this so that the circle is following along with the rest of our graph. So we can do this pretty easily simply by looking at the data we have on shape layer 3, which is our graph layer. So go ahead and unlock that layer. And I'm just going to select the layer and hit the U key to bring up that keyframe that we have set up there. So I know that the reveal is going to start on this keyframe, so I can just go ahead and grab all the keyframes from my circle pointer and drag those backwards to that point. And then I know that the last keyframe is going to happen at about this time, so I can go ahead and grab this keyframe and make it intersect with the last key of our graph. So now we have a little bit closer animation already. So what I want to do is simply go in and set markers every time my graph hits one of these elbow points. And then I'll know exactly where to reposition the keyframes in between on my circle pointer layer. So let's go ahead now and just turn off the circle pointer layer so we're not distracted by its position moving along with our graph. So I'm going to just start right here at the first keyframe and slowly scrub forward. And it looks like just right about there at about 10:18, we see that that's about to make a change. So I'm going to go ahead and set a pointer or set a marker on shape layer 3. So select your shape layer 3, and with your current time indicator at that same position right before it's about to go back down on the graph, hit the asterisk key on your number pad, and that's just going to set a marker there. And now we'll move forward to the next point. Looks like that's just about 10:22. We'll set another marker by hitting that asterisk key. We'll move to the next point and set another one here at 11:20. And we have one more there at 12:06. Okay, so we have 4 remaining keyframes here on our circle pointer layer, and I'm just going to go ahead and drag those now and hold shift to make that intersect with the markers that we've created. So I'm just dragging to the markers and then dragging those keyframes onto the markers. So we're using our current time indicator basically just to tell those keyframes where to snap to. So now we can go ahead and turn back on our circle pointer layer, and I'm just going to grab my current time indicator and put it right before this animation begins. And this is where I'm going to trim my work area to so we can watch a quick RAM preview of what we've created. And this time, instead of going in and dragging the handles of that work area, I want to show you a quick keyboard shortcut for And that is simply to hit the B key. Wherever your current time indicator is, that work area is going to snap on the left side or the beginning side of the current time indicator. Now, if you want to trim it any at the end of that current time indicator, you can move that to that point that you want and hit the N key, and that's going to make that right side snap to the current time indicator. So that's a little bit of a quicker way for you to set up those RAM previews. So now that I have my work area trimmed, let's go ahead and hit the 0 key on our number pad to start our RAM preview and watch our graph. Okay, so our RAM preview is complete, and you can see that for the most part here at the beginning, the dot is following along with our graph, but here as it gets to the end, it's not quite lining up, and that's just because we can't see the end of this graph, so we're not exactly sure if the points are ending at the same spot. So in a later lesson, we're going to do a camera move and we'll be able to see where this point is moving to, and we'll go ahead and fix that last keyframe so that those are lining up. And you can always come in here, and if you feel like the circle here on the end is a little bit too small, we can just scale that up. So I just hit the S key to bring up the scale property, and I'm just going to scale that up a little bit there just so that that interacts with the width of that stroke for the graph a little bit better. That just looks a little more balanced. And always, if you need to, you can come in and adjust those points. If you just want to click on the yellow solid itself, you can come in and drag any of these lines around if you feel like they need to be moved. So in this lesson, we learned how to create a rather complex motion path and how to retime it using the markers from our other layers positioning over time.